Good morning. The time being nearly 9 o'clock, we will open up the public hearing for this year's capital budget. I want to welcome all here. Look forward to the conversation. And I must say, I'm impressed by my colleagues that are sitting here and the breadth of knowledge. And I would like to call the chairman, Public Works, forward. David Mills.
Thank you. Good morning, Senators. For the record, my name is Representative David Mills, Chairman, Public Works and Highways. HB 25, the appropriations for capital improvements. We received the capital budget from Governor Ayotte at a projected total of $143.5 million from our office. The Public Works and Highways Committee felt that that was a little bit of a stretch over what we have done in the past 4 or 5 bienniums, and we set an arbitrary target, something that we could certainly move around if we had to try and get it down to $135 million. Eventually, we did bring it in at $132.5 million, an $11 million reduction. One of the best things that helped us was the governor had $20 million in her budget for the CTE program. And both Jaffrey Ringe and Milford towns voted it down. So that gave us $20 million to play with, which we repurposed entirely. We leveraged it up for another $122 million of federal money by funding the airports, all the state airports, and all the military projects. We put additional money into the community colleges, the Veterans Home, and what we think is a sufficient amount to finish the Cannon Mountain Tramway. I knew I'd get that right eventually. System. Aside from that, the other money that we reduced, UNH wanted $20 million for building projects. And we discovered that 12 of that $20 million was for a brand new project and $8 million was for projects that had been pre-approved, and this was the second or third installment on paying. So we did fund that, and we took the $12 million and put it in reserve. I guess we did find a couple other smaller projects to fund with that money, resulting in a total cost savings of $11 million. And aside from that, I'm here to answer any questions you may have about that.
Thank you. Before I go to the senators, I'd just like to make mention, as sitting on this side had been said prior when we came in with capital budgets from the House, very appreciative of the work you have done in your committee, and especially like the tack that you took with pulling back some of the initial funding. I'm hoping we're going to get the CTs back on track again because I'm disturbed at that trend. Maybe people start costing down so we can take care of our residents. Any questions for the chairman?
Yeah.
Yes, Senator Waters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Mills. And I want to join with the chair in saying that each year, I don't know, it's my 5th time on this, that maybe 6th, anyways, a lot of times. The House does a great job, and I really appreciate the work of the House Committee and really finding ways to fund a lot of projects, to leverage the federal funding as well, and to send us a budget that has really been carefully worked out, all the lapses and everything else, repurposes, and it's a good document. And you know, as you know, I too am concerned about the CTEs. And I had talked with the commissioner quite extensively about what we might be able to do as fallback proposals, since he does think that the Milford folks were close and that there will be an avenue for that, but we get kind of jammed up in this calendar issue about when they do their town meeting votes and when we're doing a capital budget. The cities obviously can work more quickly, and we'd be able to shift things around as it happened before, because we had cities in line who could vote quickly. I'm trying to preface that by saying I appreciate the putting the dollar in there for Milford so that there is a place for that. And I didn't know what kind of conversation you may have had with the commissioner as you were making that deliberation, if there might be a way to reserve maybe half of the Milford in this budget pending a resolution of their vote. I mean, we have sometimes split, as I recall, Senator Carson and maybe Senator Gray, we split over two projects in those municipalities when we face kind of similar circumstances. So I just want to know if you had any further thoughts if we tried to do something about that.
We did. As far as my recollection and checking with past chairs, we have never necessarily held any money back, because in addition to what we've already funded, and we had another $120 million worth of requests. And that's a lot of boilers to fix and leaky roofs to fix and air conditioning and heating systems. So, when I asked the commissioner, I said, what's going to make you happy? He said, let's just put in a placeholder. And I've assured him that, we put the dollar placeholder in, although I didn't feel it was necessary, that Public Works and Highways has always funded CTE as a priority. And if Milford was to vote yes in another year and a half, they would be our top choice to get all the money that they needed the following year. And I don't think delaying it a year would be onerous, as opposed to saving that $10 million and putting it where we could use it somewhere else right now. So that's what we decided, and to make sure that going forward, future members of Public Works and Highways would realize that that's why that dollar was in there, because we took CTEs that generously and importantly.
Well, thank you. I'm sure there'll be some continuing conversations, but I appreciate that explanation. I do. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Any further questions for Chairman Mills? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My goal or my thought process here is that we have two persons that would like to speak to us during the public hearing, and perhaps there'll be more. And then I thought Mr. Shea could give us just a quick briefing. And that's probably as far as we're going to go in today's meeting, unless you folks want to discuss further beyond that. Okay, thank you. I'd like to recognize John Graham. Well, it says in favor. It's always nice to see my former chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, I am John Graham from Bedford, New Hampshire. I am currently serving on the Board of Managers for the Veterans Home, and I am here representing them. We are in total support of what the House did with the Veterans Home, which is on page 4 of House Bill 25. They took the 5 items that the governor had recommended, and then they added the 6th priority of the home for ADA compliance at 1.5. And to be perfectly honest, this is a VA requirement. We do get funding from the VA for our home, not necessarily for capital improvements per se, but they are in next week to inspect the home. And it would be helpful if we could say that we're working on the bathrooms and bedrooms and flooring of the home as this inspection goes on. It's well worth the money at 1.5. It's a lot of money, I understand, when you're looking for money for other things, having sat on Public Works for a couple of terms. So I would ask that you leave that addition in. So we're not asking for anything more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Graham. Any questions for the Honorable Graham? Seeing none, thank you, sir. I would like to invite Representative Kaczynski forward, if you would, please. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I would like to speak, I would like to encourage you folks to delete some money from this HB 25 relating to private freight railroads. There's presently $450,000 for the New Hampshire North Coast, which is owned by Boston Sand and Gravel. And there's $825,900 of repurposed money, which I think should be prohibited from being used for private freight rail tracks. Freight rail is one of the top 10 most profitable businesses in the United States at an average of 28.8%. Anybody in business knows that's a tremendous rate. So in New Hampshire, the two major freight railroads that are subject to these subsidies, one is CSX, and in 2024, CSX had a net income of $3.47 billion. They had a 36.1% profit margin. And actually, throughout the United States, paid $2.5 billion in infrastructure investment, as they should be in a private company for their own tracks. The Stratford Carroll, New Hampshire North Coast, the owner is Boston Sand and Gravel. This is a multi-million-dollar Massachusetts business. And when you look on their website, it consists of 7 companies and 450 employees. It's a privately owned transportation system they bought in 1986 for bringing their sand from Ossipee to Boston 5 days a week. When I talk to people about this issue, everyone asks immediately, why are we subsidizing these rich companies? I was told in committee that we've always given them the money. But really, it's been the last 10 years for some reason. And I don't know how that all started, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. We're told it takes trucks off the road. And this is sounds good, but it's, I think, a little overrated argument. Because if you went down to the Hampton Tolls and looked at the trucks going by, probably in 15 minutes, you'd see more trucks go by than they're going to take off the road in a day by using freight rail. And also, they're not contributing. They're not buying trucks in New Hampshire, paying tolls, paying road tax, registrations, and other expenses. The reason they're doing this is just simple business way of doing business. Rail is cheaper than trucks, and there's high profits, and that's why rail is their choice. This isn't really a partisan issue. When I look at the Republican Party platform for less government and less spending, this doesn't seem to fit in for me. And Democrats say the rich should pay their fair share. So, you know, these are rich companies. Now, one night I read the New Hampshire State Rail Plan from 2012. And in it, there's 2 references to saying operating railroads freight railroads are required to maintain their lines at their own expense. But the fact is, even without these subsidies, these companies are going to still operate. The profit margins are too high for the profit companies, and the savings are too large for Boston Sand and Gravel to give up. Now, again, these are rich companies. If, say, Elon Musk made a proposal to the state of New Hampshire, he's going to put charging stations all the way up I-93, but he'd like to have a public-private partnership so he could get some help with that. How do you think that would go over? And that's exactly what this is here. In a tight budget here, I don't think there's any reason for this largesse spending. And plus, this money's gonna be bonded, so we're borrowing money and paying interest on it to subsidize private companies. I urge you to consider this, and I'd like to see this deleted, and I think it would be in the best interest of our constituents to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Is there any questions? Yes, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Representative.
Good morning.
I'm looking at the bill as amended by the House on page 4, and it says on line 30, Carroll and Stratford with burial improvement. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Can I look, Mr.
Yes, you certainly may.
Thank you. Do you know if there's an existing contract that ties the state of New Hampshire to help pay for maintenance of the track?
I know this is a matching deal, so we give them 450,000 and they put in 450,000. You might look at that as saying the cost for this repair is 900,000 and the citizens of New Hampshire are paying half of it. As far as this track, as far as I know, they own this track, the 43 miles from Ossipee to Rollingsford. And through the years, they've been paying for it, as they should. It's their railroad. I mean, if they sell this railroad, I don't think the citizens of New Hampshire are going to get a dividend from that, from any sales.
Senator Carson?
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. If you look at a municipality and how they own the roads, I've been told that it's like 13 feet from the middle of the road on both sides are actually owned by the municipality. Do you know if rail is the same way? I guess what I'm looking for is how many feet around the rail itself is the rail company responsible for maintaining? And is this what some of the money might go for?
If I could, there is, and if you don't mind my response.
please.
There is a defined footprint that the rail has. The majority of this money over the course of my 20 years there is that it's for the replacement of rails and ties. And it's an expensive process. I'm sorry.
That's what I understand too. That's what was.
Sure, one more, certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Mr. Shea. Mr. Shea, do you know of any kind of existing contract or memorandum of understanding that ties us to match this?
There's nothing other than what's been put in House Bill 25. And when the appropriation is made to the Department of Transportation, they then do a contract with the entity and that goes through governor and council for the appropriation and what it's going to be used for. But in terms of an ongoing agreement that goes into the future, I'm not aware of anything. I think it's based on the appropriations that are made to the Department of Transportation for this purpose. And in this bill, there's language that says that the private entity needs to match to dollar for dollar. So if they get $200,000, the private entity needs to match $200,000.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? I would just thank you, Representative, for your time. I'd just like to direct your attention, you have a letter in your packet from Eastern Propane, who were one of the companies that has an agreement with this firm that Representative was just speaking to, bringing propane to, actually to my area, all right? Is there anyone else that wishes to testify today? Anyone wishing to speak a second time? Seeing none. Mr. Shea, would you?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Chris Shea from the LBA. Per your request, I can walk the committee through what the changes were for the House. I think in your packet, you have a compare document. It's an Excel sheet. Should have yellow highlights on it. If you don't, I have some with gray shade on it. What that document does is it takes sections 1 and 2 of the bill and puts it in a kind of a side-by-side comparison.
Just one second. Is that what you said? Thank you. Thank you so much. Here. Yeah. Yeah. So that was right. Okay.
It's on my desk.
I'm gonna find it out.
And then there's this version too.
So again, what that document does, it just takes sections 1 and 2 of the bill, puts it in a side-by-side comparison format. And starting on page 1, the first agency was the Department of Administrative Services. You can see that the House made no change from what the governor had recommended. Starting on row 8 was the Community College System of New Hampshire. The House added a funding for critical maintenance, energy management systems, and IT infrastructure. The IT infrastructure was a total amount of $800,000, of which you see $150,000 in section 1 of the bill. There's a section later on in the bill, and I'll note that for you when I get to it, where there was a repurposing of money that was lapsed that was used to fund this. Department of Corrections, there was no change from what the governor had recommended. The Department of Education, I believe we just got through discussing that with the Representative Mills, but the Jaffrey Ringe project was not voted forward, so that $18.5 million was removed. A dollar appropriation was put in for the Milford Applied Technology Center in a way for the House to show its support for CTE. Department of Environmental Services, there was no change from the governor's position. The only thing that was changed, there's a note in the capital budget as it relates to the Winnipesaukee River Basin project, and it referenced the wrong RSA, so the department had asked to have that fixed. The Fish and Game Commission, the only addition was a replacement for their John Deere backhoe. That was one of the late ads that the House had near the end of their process. For the Department of Health and Human Services, the House wanted to make sure the elevators worked at the Glencliff home, so they appropriated $450,000 for that.
Can I ask the question?
Yes, please.
As we
Go ahead.
along, do you
Yes.
want me to-
Yeah, no, why don't you go now, sir?
On the fishing game backhoe,
Yes.
I know we've often tried to avoid buying vehicles through capital budget. Was there any discussion about this perhaps being found through a non-bonded source?
So the department brought it in as a last minute request when they came forward. There was a conversation about why they needed it now. They talked about how old theirs was, but there was not a conversation about was there a way to maybe lease or find another way to pay for this. So the House felt that it would be okay to put it in, but to your point, Senator, and there's oftentimes questions about bonding vehicles than the life of the vehicle.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, maybe if you could maybe ask them about whether it'd be possible from the fishing game fund or any other sources. It just, we're going to be paying for it for decades, right? And it's a vehicle.
Right, and they can't pay cash out of the Fish and Game Fund, and the reason that it's bonded at general funds is that they don't feel they have the capacity in the Fish and Game Fund to bond it. Yeah.
If I could, I'd like to follow up on Sarah Waters' question. I would appreciate a conversation with them, or if they could bring some documentation on what they're using presently, the age of, and stance of that repair. I share a similar concern as Senator Waters on that.
Yep, we can see if we can get them here.
Thank you. Continue if you could, please.
So I had gone to Health and Human Services. The on line 47 was the ad of the Glencliff warehouse elevator. For the Department of Information Technology, the cybersecurity enhancements was felt to be more of an important issue for the House, so they funded that and removed the funding for the cloud solutions and services. The department had come in asking for cybersecurity funding, and their ask had been to reduce the cloud solutions to about half of what the ask is there and to provide the other. The House just felt the cybersecurity was more important. Judicial branch did not need this project. They removed the project right at the start so that That's just a delete. Military Affairs had three projects added. Two of them were fully federally funded, and one was the split between federal fund and general funds. It was a 25-75 split. That was the Plymouth Readiness Center. Under Natural and Cultural Resources, the governor had Cannon Mountain Aerial Tramway appropriated at $20 million. The House added an additional $6 million. And as Representative Mills testified earlier this morning, the feeling was that that was close enough to get the project done. The department had come in and spoke to the committee about, they believe there's some other revenue streams that they might be able to use to help fund the tramway. So that they felt comfortable that this should get them there. Peace Development,
Yes, on, question on
Yep.
that. Yes, please.
Well, this is
Senator.
on, I'm sorry, it's not on the tramway, but on the Connecticut Lake Headwaters road repairs. I know there's no change, but is that going to take care of all the repairs that were needed because of the flooding and other things?
I think this is just regular maintenance up there. I think that there's so much roadway that any money they get is just trying to catch up. They were appropriated money last budget as well. I think $1.5 million in the last capital budget.
I had wondered, if there are any additional needs because of the extensive flooding, but maybe they're taking care of that out of.
Yeah, I'm assuming, and I'd have to look at the document from the House. They prioritize where the needs, where water might have been washing road away. But their testimony was that they have
Thank you.
tens of miles of road that, it doesn't go very far, this appropriation.
And we, just to follow up, and Chris had made mention of it, we had not been putting money into our roads up there. And the last budget we had started putting in, so it's worthwhile. Please go ahead, sir.
The next is Pease Development Authority on line 82. There was 3 projects added for the Pease. The Market Street Terminal, Main Wharf dredging, the Rye Harbor, Hampton Harbor riprap repair, and the Market Street Marine Terminal warehouse removal of the office and the warehouse and put an office in. That seemed to be one of their biggest priorities, is in that building has limited use in terms of when people are in it. If the winds are blowing a certain strength, they have to have people leave the building because they're afraid it might collapse. So I thought that was just interesting. If you wanted to work remotely, I guess that was the job to take. Department of Safety starts on line 92, but flips into page 4. They added $1.3 million of restricted funds to replace some of the plate equipment. So the department had came in with a ask that was twice this amount. They went back to their vendor and was able to reduce it to the 1.3 million. And as a result, they're able to use a restricted or dedicated fund to fund the capital appropriation. Under the University System of New Hampshire, as was mentioned, there was the removal of the $12 million project on line 101, which was for the Morse Hall.
Yes, please. I'm sorry, Senator Waters.
I'm sorry, not quite keeping up. I just, on the Department of Safety request, just for those folks who aren't on finance, the decision is made to shift the plate production from corrections to safety, and the machinery for the old stamping and everything at corrections was just not maintainable and out of date, and they have a new system for making the plates, and so they're going to shift it over to safety. Corrections is fine with that, but this is the new equipment, so they can do the kind of new printed plates rather than the punched ones. So did I get that right, Mr. Chairman?
Senator Gray.
I believe that you did get it correct, but I have concerns that we need to have activities that those inmates can do. And so buying equipment is something, yes, that I agree with. Shifting from embossed plates to other plates, yes, I believe that is.
Yeah.
But I do not necessarily agree with the shifting of the manufacturing out of the Department of Corrections, because it does give them things to do. And
I made a comment on that, Mr. Chairman. So Senator Lang and I are going to meet with Commissioner Hanks on Monday, but I was told yesterday by safety that she can find other work programs for them, and that's why she's okay with this. But we'll follow up on Monday with that. And if you'd like to, I can tell you when a meeting, or you can call her. But anyways, that's the preliminary answer I got for that same question. So we'll see, but it's important.
Thank you. I guess my question is, if someone could just find me an answer. So is this new machinery automation? Who are the people that are going to be producing the plates? Is this outsourced or people coming in? How are we doing that? Because I mirror the same sort of concern that Senator Gray has.
So when they came through the House, they made no comment as to whether it was going to be kept within DOC or moved out into some other arena. That decision hadn't been made. So I don't know, have an answer to that. So it's something we can ask the department.
You can talk to safety. They're gonna do it.
We can ask the department. One other comment just related to the plate production. That may be coming out, but the manufacturer of the stickers and decals would still remain in Department of Corrections, is the understanding that I had from safety. Because there was a question about how closely the two were related to each other. And they were clear that the plates are one thing, stickers and decals are another thing, and that would continue no matter whatever the decision was made with the plates.
Okay, thank you. We satisfied at that point? Please continue.
As I said, the Cannon Mountain Aerial Tramway, there was they were fine with that. Okay, we did, sorry. University system. So the university system, the $12 million for the Morse Hall on line 101 was removed. And then the $4 million for Hyde Hall and Keene States, Morrison, Redfern, and Ketty were combined into a single appropriation of $8 million. And you can see that's on row 99. And then there's a note added in the budget that basically allows the university system to, with the approval of the university board, to move money in between those projects as needed. The university system is going to make a request of the committee to broaden the language to allow it to be used for deferred maintenance at its academic facilities. I'm in the process of getting a letter from the commissioner, the chancellor now, to explain what they would like to do. They don't want to change the value of the $8 million. It's just how they would move it between facilities. The Veterans Home, you heard Representative Graham testify to that on row 111. It was the addition of the TAR South, TAR North, making it ADA compliant. Department of Transportation, on row 116 was added the state match for the FAA projects. And as a result, the federal portion is added, which is $64.9 million. And then on row 118, you heard about the rail, the Carroll Stratford Freight Rail. So that's the, everything that's generally funded. So that's section 1 of the bill. Section 2, if you flip the page, is the Department of Transportation. These are highway funds that are used to fund these projects. So they amended the request for their salt and sand shed replacements, and then had 4 other projects that the committee agreed to on the House side to fund, which were the replacement of some underground storage tanks around the state, to do some work on the garage in Twin Mountain, to do the Lumster patrol facility replacement, and do the pre-construction work for the Pinkham patrol facility replacement. And if you move down to row 142, that is the general fund portion of the bonding. And so that's where you see the number of $132.4 million, almost $32.5 million that Representative Mills had mentioned. And in column C was the $143.4 million that the governor had appropriated or recommended to be appropriated. So that's section 1 and 2 of the bill. In addition to those changes, there were several other changes within the body of the bill. So if you have House Bill 2 as amended, section 7, which I believe is on page 6, it's just the bonds authorized. So the amounts adjust based on what you saw on the table for the House. On page 7, you got section 13, which was the lapse work that the House did. So they go through all the lapse extensions and any projects that are ending at the end of this biennium. And if there's any funds left, they try to repurpose that for other projects. In this case, it was the matching dollars for the community college that was, I did mention at the start. On page 8, the bottom of the page is section 14. This is the Department of Transportation had 2 long-term projects that they, to buy rail, and they don't believe they're going to be using those remaining funds for that purpose. So they'd asked these, to have that funds repurposed, it's about $800,000, to be used for the purchase of replacement rails and ties on state-owned active railroad lines. This was the other section that Representative Kaczynski was mentioning in his testimony earlier, where you may want to restrict language there so it's not used for freight rail, but that's just so you know where he was directing his comments. On that page, you also have on line 19 is section 15. That's where the judicial branch has repurposed several of its capital appropriations related to E-Court to broaden it to be associated critical infrastructure. What they're finding is that they've gone through the E-Court process, which is to make sure all the courts can talk with their computers with each other. And it's some of the infrastructure around that that supports that function that they want to be able to use some of their remaining funds for. And section 17 is the Department of Military Affairs with, they renamed several of the projects that they had. And this was a deliberate action to try to get the federal funds to match more easily. With the old naming convention that they had, they were having some challenges in getting the matching federal dollars. So the feeling was if they use this title, it broadened the scope so the feds would look at it and say, oh, we can give you the match that you're entitled to. And then starting at the bottom of page 10 is the lapse extensions. And there was several lapse extensions removed, and there were several that were edited to reflect the title changes. I don't believe you will dive too deeply into the lapse extensions because the House had done a fairly decent job with that. But if you turn to page 18, you'll see that on line 14 through 17, there's 2 judicial branch projects. 18.
I'm sorry, start again on page 18.
Yeah, line 14 through 17. There's 2 judicial branch projects there. Those titles had been changed to reflect what's in the bill earlier. And the same thing on page 19, lines 3 through 6. That was the Department of Military Affairs, and lines 13 through 14. Those lapse extension titles were adjusted to reflect what was done in the earlier portion of the bill. And then the last thing in the lapse extensions is on the last page. So page 23, it's line 33. It's a Department of Transportation. This is an extension for the Carroll Stratford Freight Rail Improvements appropriation that was contained in the 2023 capital budget. That project's been encumbered. It has gone to Governor and Council. It won't be completed until December of 2025. So as a belt and suspenders approach, they extended the lapse as well as already having it encumbered. It wouldn't lapse anyways. But if something were to happen to this contract and they needed to start from scratch again, the lapse extension would keep the dollars available. And that's pretty much it in terms of the capital budget and what was done.
I appreciate you taking the time to run us through. Are there any questions for Mr. Shea? Yes, Senator Waters.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you know, thanks for all the work on the lapses and everything else. So I know this has probably been pretty scrubbed as of the date the House had it. Do you anticipate any further lapses or any funding that might appear before we act on this?
I don't. A capital project overview this last meeting, you had the Department of Administrative Services come in to repurpose some projects that are lapsing to be used for another project. They're doing that again, I think at your next meeting as well.
Yeah.
So there's an effort to try to clean up as much as they can. And the projects that we did identify, there was nothing that stood out to say, okay, they might come to fruition before June 30. So that the House did ask those questions of the agencies as they brought them forward.
And one more, thanks. It's hard to know how to ask this question, but in terms of the federal matches here, is there any, do you anticipate under any uncertainty as to whether they will actually be available?
I'm not an authority to answer that, but I think the easy answer is that federal dollars are always at risk. Under the new environment, they may be more at risk than they have been in the past, but the departments would know that best. They would have their contacts letting them know what they might be seeing or hearing. I think some of what you've seen in terms of the Department of Military Affairs and why they've changed some of their projects, and I think is a reaction to some of what they think they can get going forward. But in terms of other agencies like the FAA grants and things like that, I don't know. That those would be questions directly for those departments.
If I may.
Yes, please.
In the event that occurs, would that be an issue then that would be dealt with in the capital budget oversight? Or do you think that it would require a fuller action on the part of the legislature if it gets to a level that, you know, really jeopardizes some priorities that we have for the state?
So you would, it depend, the answer is it depends. The reason it depends is if there was a federal match needed to continue a project, the Capital Project Overview Committee couldn't appropriate additional funds for that project. That would have to be done through a legislative special and go through the legislative process. If there was a ability to transfer, so in the capital budget, if you can transfer similar funds in the same year for projects, as long as your project's completed. So if it's not started, is it completed would be the question. And so you may, again, need legislative approval from the full body to do something. If an agency were to ask me, I would direct them to go through a legislative special. You know, if they said we aren't going to have federal funds to do our project, could the CPOC move some money around for us or help us with this? More than likely, I would direct them to go back to the full body and have a bill go through, just so that it could be addressed correctly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No further questions from Mr. Shea? No one here to testify. I will,
I do have,
please.
I don't think the disclosure is required, but I do want to make sure that, that I tell that I have a daughter and a son-in-law that work for Eastern, which would be impacted by this, but I intend to participate.
Thank you for that. Yes,
Thank you, Mr.
President Carson.
Chairman. I do need to make a disclosure that I am employed by the community college system, but I'm not going to be impacted by what they're doing.
Certainly. Thank you. Any other statements? I will call the public hearing today to a close. Thank you. Yeah, our agencies,